Hello, my friend. Welcome to your sleep story. My name is Stephen Dalton. I'm an Irish storyteller, and it's my great privilege to be the voice that you listen to as you go to sleep tonight. Tonight I continue my boring series. If you haven't heard my boring series before, well, it's not like my normal stories that are filled with magic or adventure or time travel. These stories are more on the humorous side. The humor lies in the ridiculous detail I go into, and tonight you'll hear about the most boring wedding in the world. We've all been to weddings. Well, this one, you might not want to have been at it, but I really hope you enjoy hearing about it, and maybe you'll go to sleep with a smile on your face. But first, let's do the relaxation session, which will take a few minutes before tonight's sleep story. I'm going to count down from 10 to 1, and as I do, allow yourself to let go more and more. 10. Feel the support of the bed beneath you, or the floor, or whatever you lie upon tonight. And beneath what you lie upon, feel a deeper support. The support of the earth, our home, our constant support. And as you become aware of that support, see if you can sink into this moment a little more now. Just let go. A little more now. 9. You are safe. Allow my voice to be an anchor of safety tonight. To be a friend, to be a gentle guide, a guide that only ever brings you to safe places, to warm and cozy places, to places that enable and support your sleep. Trust that my voice is a friend tonight. 8. Feel into your body now. Notice where you might still be holding tonight. Notice where you may have pain or tingling or tension. Notice anything. Maybe you feel something in your feet or in your lower legs or your thighs or your belly, your chest, shoulders, your neck, your back, arms, hands, Or maybe you're like me and you hold tension in your face. Just see if you can soften a little now. This is a time for kindness to yourself and to your body. 7. The day is done. Whatever has been, has been. Whatever will be, will be. But right now, all you have is this moment. Your thoughts can't change what has gone before. Your thoughts can't change what will come tomorrow. Your brain needs rest now. So, as thoughts come and go now, don't fight them. Don't chase them away. See them for what they are. Thoughts. Then just watch them go, like leaves floating away on a moonlit river, or clouds passing through a starlit sky. Six. This is your moment. This is your time. You have earned this moment of kindness to yourself. You deserve to have peace in your life. We all do. So, as you become aware of that fact, as you come to the understanding that we all deserve peace, see if you can settle into this moment a little more now, letting your body know that it's really time for rest. Five. Peace lives within you. It is a constant friend, waiting to be found, waiting to be felt. Where does it live within you? Maybe it's in your heart. Maybe it's in your head. It's up to you to find it. But I promise you it's there. 4. Perhaps allow a little gratitude now. Gratitude for the simple things, for your body, for the shelter you have tonight, for the ones you love and who love you, for the beauty and wonder of this world, of this planet, that you can find when you look for it. Three, begin to engage with your imagination now. Begin to see the most boring and average-looking hotel you can possibly imagine, with parking outside and a man in a high-vis jacket. It's raining, and no one looks that excited to be there. 2. Checking in with your body one more time now. Finding the places you are holding still, and allowing yourself to give in, to allow the tension to ease away. Your body has worked hard for you today. It's time to give it rest. And 1. Completely letting go now. As I tell you tonight's sleep story. It was raining. It had been raining since the Tuesday of the previous week, and the forecast for the weekend had, according to the Met Office app that Gerald Pemberton had checked at 6:42 that morning, continued to suggest rain throughout Saturday, with a small dry window of 40 minutes between 2:10 and 2:50 in the afternoon. Gerald's daughter Fiona was getting married at 2 o'clock. The wedding was taking place at the Cotswold Chine Country House Hotel, which was a converted manor house on the outskirts of a village called Little Wendlebury, approximately 7 miles from the M40 at Junction 9. The hotel had been selected in February 2023 by Fiona's fiancé, Martin, after a visit the couple had made to view it on a Sunday afternoon, during which they had also had a cream tea in the lounge, for which Martin had paid £18.50 with a 10% discount voucher he had downloaded from the Daily Mail website. The hotel had 47 bedrooms, a heated indoor pool that was closed for refurbishment between the months of November and April, and a ballroom called the Regency Suite, which could accommodate up to 140 seated guests for a formal meal, or 180 for a standing buffet. The wedding was for 86 guests seated. The hotel's general manager was a woman called Rosemary Dutton. She had been in post since March 2021, having previously managed a smaller hotel near Stroud. She had been at the hotel since 7:15 that morning, which was 30 minutes earlier than her usual start time, in order to oversee the preparations for the wedding. Rosemary was, at 11:40, in the kitchen, speaking to the head chef, Mark Gillespie, about a delivery of halibut that had arrived that morning and that was not, in Mark's view, of a sufficient standard to be served to guests. The halibut had been ordered for a private dinner booking for 8 people on the Sunday evening, and was not connected to the wedding. But Mark had mentioned it to Rosemary, because he wanted a note made on the supplier's file. Rosemary made a note. The kitchen was 87 square meters in floor area and contained 6 gas ranges, 2 large ovens, and a walk-in refrigerator that had been replaced in November 2023 at a cost of £11,800, including installation. Gerald stood at the window of room 203. He was wearing the trousers of his wedding suit, which he had collected from Moss Brothers in Beaconsfield on the previous Thursday, together with a white shirt, which he had ironed himself that morning on the ironing board provided by the hotel, and 1 navy sock. He had not yet put on the other sock, because he had dropped it behind the radiator while getting dressed, and had been unable to reach it without moving the radiator, which was fixed to the wall. He was looking out at the car park. The car park of the Cotswold Chine Country House Hotel held 62 spaces, 4 of which were reserved for disabled drivers, and 2 of which were designated for electric vehicle charging. The electric vehicle charging points had been installed in September 2024 at a cost, Gerald had read in the parish newsletter during a previous visit to the area, of approximately £14,000, including the associated groundworks. The rain was falling on the car park. In the car park, a man in a high-visibility jacket was directing arriving cars to available spaces, using a set of hand gestures which Gerald watched for several minutes. The man's name, Gerald would later learn, was Kevin Thwaite, and he had been employed by the hotel on a casual basis for 11 years. The television in Gerald's room was tuned to BBC News, which was showing a report about flooding in Shropshire. The volume was set to 12. Gerald's wife, Margaret, was in the bathroom, where she had been for 23 minutes, doing her hair. "Gerald," Margaret called from the bathroom, "have you seen my hairspray?" "Which one?" "The Elnet." "The one you bought in Boots on Friday?" "No, the other one." "The one from Superdrug?" "Yes." "It's in the side pocket of the overnight bag." "Which overnight bag?" "The green one." "Right." Gerald returned his attention to the window. A navy blue Volkswagen Passat had just entered the car park, and was being directed by Kevin Thwaite to space 34, which was in the third row from the entrance. Gerald recognized the Passat as belonging to his brother-in-law Derek, who lived in Redditch, and had set out that morning at 8:45, according to a text message Gerald had received at 8:47. Derek got out of the Passat. He was carrying an umbrella, which he opened, and a wedding present, which was wrapped in silver paper and tied with a white ribbon. The wedding present was, Gerald happened to know, a set of 6 crystal wine glasses that Derek had bought from John Lewis in Birmingham for £72, reduced from £90 in the January sale. Derek walked across the car park towards the main entrance of the hotel. His wife Brenda followed behind him, carrying a second, smaller present, which Gerald assumed was the card. Brenda was wearing a fascinator. The fascinator was pale lilac. Brenda had bought the fascinator from a shop in the Kingfisher shopping centre in Redditch on the previous Wednesday. The shop was called Occasion, and it specialised in hats, fascinators, and wedding guest outfits. The fascinator had cost £34.99, and Brenda had also purchased, on the same visit, a pair of matching earrings for £12.50. Brenda's shoes were cream court shoes with a 2-inch heel. She had bought them in August 2022 for her niece's wedding. The niece, who was called Tracy, had married a man called Darren in a church in Dwatwich Spa. Brenda was carrying, in addition to the smaller present, a cream clutch bag. Inside the clutch bag were a packet of tissues, a lipstick, a mobile phone, and £40 in cash. Behind Derek and Brenda, a silver Ford Fiesta entered the car park. The Fiesta was being driven by Sheila Pemberton, who was Gerald's sister, and who had travelled from her home in Wolverhampton. Sheila was accompanied by her husband Trevor and her adult son Damien, who was 31 and lived at home. Kevin Thwaite directed the Fiesta to space 38. Sheila got out. She was wearing a navy dress with a cream pattern of small flowers. Her coat was beige. Her hat, which was a structured hat with a wide brim, was also navy. Trevor got out. He was wearing a grey suit and a blue tie. Damien got out. He was wearing a black suit and a black tie. He had been told by his mother on the drive down that a black tie was not appropriate for a wedding, but he had not changed his tie. The three of them walked across the car park towards the main entrance. Sheila was carrying a wedding card in a pink envelope. Downstairs, in the Regency suite, the chairs were being arranged by a man named Colin, who worked for the hotel's events team. Colin had started at the hotel in 2019, after leaving a similar job at a Holiday Inn Express in Reading, a move he had made for an additional 80 pence per hour plus the opportunity to work in a country house setting. He had never regretted the move, although he did sometimes miss the ease of the motorway access at Reading. Colin was arranging the chairs in 12 rows, with an aisle down the middle. Each row had 8 chairs, 4 on each side of the aisle. The chairs were white wooden chairs, of the sort that were kept specifically for wedding ceremonies, and that were stored between events in a covered area behind the garage block. Colin counted the chairs. He had set out 96 chairs, which was 10 more than the number of confirmed guests, in order to allow for late additions and for the wedding party themselves. He would remove 10 chairs if they were not required, but only after the ceremony had begun, as it was company policy not to remove chairs during the arrival of guests, in case this should cause offense. A string quartet had arrived at 12:45 and had set up in the corner near the window. They were called the Tetbury Strings, and they charged £620 for a 3-hour booking, which included travel from their base in Tetbury and a half-hour sound check. They were currently tuning their instruments. The cellist, whose name was Philip, was drinking a can of Diet Coke. The flowers on the end of each row of chairs were cream roses mixed with a small quantity of gypsophila, tied with a cream satin ribbon. The florist, a woman called Sandra, who ran a business from a converted barn in Chipping Norton, had delivered them at 11:15 that morning. She had charged £480 for the flowers for the ceremony, plus a further £340 for the reception flowers, making a total of £820, including VAT. The aisle runner was a length of cream carpet 14 meters long and 1.2 meters wide. It was slightly wrinkled near the end, closest to the door. In room 118, Fiona Pemberton was having her makeup done by a woman called Leanne, who had driven up that morning from her home in Bicester in a white Vauxhall Corsa. Leanne had been a wedding makeup artist for 9 years. Before that, she had worked for 3 years as a beautician at a salon in Milton Keynes, and before that, she had spent 2 years on the cosmetics counter at Debenhams in High Wycombe, before Debenhams closed in 2021. She had been doing Fiona's makeup for 4 minutes longer than the allotted time, because she had to redo the left eye after Fiona sneezed. Fiona was sitting on a chair in front of the dressing table. She was wearing a white dressing gown provided by the hotel. Her dress was hanging on the wardrobe door, covered in a clear plastic bag. The dress had been bought in April 2024 from a bridal shop in Oxford called Veneto. It had cost £1,450, reduced from £1,895 because it was the shop sample, although Fiona had had it professionally cleaned before the wedding at a cost of £95. Fiona's chief bridesmaid was her cousin, Hannah, who was sitting on the end of the bed reading a magazine. The magazine was a copy of Country Life from October 2022, which had been left in the room by a previous guest. "What time is it?" said Fiona. 1:27, said Hannah. "When's the car coming?" 1:45. "It's still raining." "Yes." "Has Mum been in?" "About 10 minutes ago." "What did she want?" "She wanted to know where her hairspray was." "Which one?" "The L-net." "Right." Leanne applied a small amount of translucent powder to Fiona's nose. "Close your eyes a minute, love," said Leanne. Fiona closed her eyes. Leanne applied a small amount of mascara to Fiona's upper lashes. The mascara was a brand called Maybelline Sky High, which Leanne had bought from the Boots in Bicester for £9.99 on a 3 for 2 offer. The other 2 items on the offer had been a concealer and a bronzer. "Open," said Leanne. Fiona opened her eyes. "How does it look?" said Fiona. "Really nice," said Hannah, who had looked up briefly from the Country Life magazine. "Really nice," said Leanne. Fiona looked at herself in the mirror. The mirror was the dressing table mirror provided by the hotel, which was a rectangular mirror with a white wooden frame. The frame had a small chip in the top right corner where a previous guest had knocked it with a suitcase. "What page is the article about the house in Shropshire on?" said Fiona. "Page 68, said Hannah. "Is it nice?" "It's got 11 bedrooms." "Right." Leanne began to apply blusher to Fiona's cheekbones. There was a knock at the door. "Who is it?" said Fiona. "Me," said Margaret. "Come in," said Fiona. Margaret came in. She was now fully dressed for the wedding. She was wearing a dress in a shade described on the label as dusty pink, with a matching jacket. She was also wearing a large hat, which had been bought from a milliner in Amersham at a cost of £180. The hat was the subject of a conversation that Margaret and Gerald had had on 4 separate occasions during the preceding month, as Gerald considered the hat to have been overpriced. "I found the L-net," said Margaret. "Where was it?" said Fiona. "In the overnight bag." "Which one?" "The green one, where your father said it would be." "Right. Are you nearly ready?" "Leanne says another 10 minutes. "Another 10 minutes, said Leanne. "Right," said Margaret. "I'll come back." Margaret left the room. The ceremony was conducted by a registrar named Mr. Alan Woodhouse, who had driven over from the Oxfordshire Register Office in Oxford in a grey Skoda Fabia. Mr. Woodhouse had been a registrar for 18 years. Before becoming a registrar, he had worked in the planning department of Cherwell District Council, a post he had held for 26 years, rising from the position of Assistant Planning Officer to Senior Planning Officer. He had taken early retirement in 2006 and had trained as a registrar because, as he told anyone who asked, he wanted to do something a little bit different. Mr. Woodhouse stood at the front of the Regency suite behind a small wooden lectern which the hotel provided for weddings at no extra charge. He was wearing a dark grey suit, a white shirt, and a maroon tie. The tie had been a gift from his wife, Patricia, on the occasion of his 60th birthday in 2013. At 2 o'clock, or more precisely, at 3 minutes past 2, the string quartet began to play Pachelbel's Canon in D, and Fiona entered the Regency suite on the arm of her father Gerald, who had by this point retrieved his other sock by means of a wire coat hanger and had put on his jacket. Fiona walked slowly down the aisle. The aisle runner was, as previously noted, slightly wrinkled near the end, closest to the door. Fiona's left heel caught briefly in the wrinkle, but she did not fall. Martin was waiting at the front. He was wearing a 3-piece suit in navy wool, which he had bought from Marks and Spencer in High Wycombe for £299. His best man, whose name was also Martin, although he went by Mart to avoid confusion, was standing beside him, holding the rings. The rings were in a small silver box. The ceremony took 17 minutes. Mr. Woodhouse welcomed the guests. He explained the legal nature of a civil marriage ceremony. He asked whether anyone present knew of any lawful impediment. Nobody did. He invited the couple to exchange their vows, which they did, in the standard form provided by the Oxfordshire Register Office. He invited them to exchange rings. The rings were exchanged successfully, although Mart momentarily dropped the box when handing it to Martin and had to pick it up again. Fiona and Martin were pronounced husband and wife. They kissed briefly. The kiss lasted approximately 1.5 seconds. The string quartet began to play the recessional, which was Mendelssohn's Wedding March. The couple proceeded back down the aisle. At the door, they paused to allow photographs to be taken by a photographer named Greg, who was based in Banbury and charged £1,400 for a full wedding package, including a print album and digital files. Greg had been photographing weddings for 12 years. Before that, he had been a driving instructor. There was a dry window, as the Met Office had predicted, between approximately 2:10 and 2:50 in the afternoon. During this window, the guests were moved outside onto the terrace for group photographs. The terrace overlooked a lawn which sloped down towards a small ornamental pond. The pond contained, according to a laminated notice attached to a wooden post at the end of the lawn, koi carp. Greg arranged the guests in various configurations for the group photographs. the main family took 11 minutes to arrange, during which time Fiona's great-aunt Muriel, who was 89 and had travelled from a residential care home in Cheltenham, had to be found a folding chair. The chair was fetched by Kevin Thwaite from the chair store behind the garage block. Muriel sat in the centre of the front row. She was wearing a purple coat and a matching purple hat. The hat had a small fabric flower on it, which was peach in colour. Greg took the photograph. Greg took another photograph, in case the first one had not worked. Greg took a third photograph, which was a candid shot of people talking to each other for inclusion in the printed album as a selection shot. At 2:48, as the Met Office had predicted, the rain began again. The guests were moved inside. The drinks reception was held in the hotel's Oak Lounge, which was a wood-panelled room on the ground floor with a large fireplace at one end. The fireplace was not lit because the hotel's fire policy required 2 weeks' notice for the lighting of real fires in public rooms, and the wedding had been booked under the standard package, which did not include real fires. An electric heater had been placed in front of the fireplace. The drinks being served were Prosecco, at £24 a bottle from the hotel's approved supplier list, orange juice in large glass jugs, sparkling elderflower in bottles at £3.80 per bottle, a non-alcoholic beer called Lucky Saint, which had been requested by the groom's father, Raymond, who had given up alcohol in 2019. Canapés were being circulated by 4 waiters. The canapés were smoked salmon on blinis with dill cream, mini Yorkshire puddings with rare beef and horseradish, goat's cheese and caramelized onion tartlets, vegetarian spring rolls with a sweet chili dip. Fiona's grandmother, who was 84 and whose name was Dorothy, was sitting on an armchair near the window. She was drinking orange juice. She was eating a goat's cheese and caramelized onion tartlet. The tartlet was cold, as all the canapés were cold by the time they reached the far corner of the room, which was where Dorothy had chosen to sit because it was nearest to the radiator. Dorothy's handbag was on the floor beside her chair. It was a tan leather handbag from Marks & Spencer, which she had owned for 11 years. Inside the handbag were her reading glasses, a packet of Werther's Originals, a clean handkerchief, a second handkerchief that had been used once, a packet of paracetamol, her house keys, and a small notebook in which she kept a record of everybody's birthdays. The rain was falling steadily on the terrace outside. On the terrace, an empty Prosecco glass that a guest had forgotten on the stone balustrade was filling slowly with rainwater. The seating plan for the wedding breakfast had been the subject of a number of discussions between Fiona and Martin during the preceding 6 months. Considerable thought had been given to who should be seated where, and the final plan, printed on a large framed board that had been placed on an easel in the hallway outside the Regency suite, represented the outcome of a compromise reached in late July. The top table had 8 guests: Fiona, Martin, Gerald, Margaret, Raymond, Martin's mother Susan, the best man, Mart, and the chief bridesmaid, Anna. Table 2 was the Pemberton relatives. Table 3 was the other Pemberton relatives, the ones who did not get on with the ones on Table 2. Table 4 was Martin's aunts and uncles. Table 5 was Martin's cousins. Table 6 was Fiona's friends from university. Table 7 was Fiona's friends from work. Table 8 was Martin's friends from school. And Table 9 was Martin's colleagues from the accountancy firm where he worked. There was also a small table, Table 10, for 4 of Fiona's older neighbours, whom Fiona had invited because they had lived next door to the Pembertons since Fiona was a child and had always given her a Christmas card. The menu for the wedding breakfast, which had been printed on cream card with a narrow gold border, consisted of, to start, twice-baked cheese soufflé with a chive cream sauce, or chicken liver parfait with toasted brioche and fig chutney, or, for vegetarians, a roasted tomato and basil tart. For the main course, roast loin of Oxfordshire pork with dauphinoise potatoes and seasonal vegetables, or pan-fried sea bass with crushed new potatoes and a lemon butter sauce, or, for vegetarians, a wild mushroom risotto. For dessert, a trio of miniature desserts comprising a lemon tart, a chocolate pot, and a raspberry pavlova, followed by coffee and petit fours. The speeches began at 4:45, approximately 12 minutes behind the schedule that had been printed in the running order. Gerald was the first to speak. His speech lasted 11 minutes. He had prepared it over the course of 3 evenings in the study at home, using a writing pad and a biro, and he had typed it up on the Saturday before the wedding on the family computer, which was an HP desktop that had been bought in 2019. He had printed it out on 3 sheets of A4 paper, which he held in his left hand while he spoke. Gerald welcomed the guests. He thanked them for coming. He spoke about Fiona as a child, including an anecdote about a holiday to Cornwall in 1998, during which Fiona, who had been 4 at the time, had become lost on a beach for approximately 6 minutes before being found by a family from Stoke-on-Trent. He spoke about Fiona's achievements at school, at university, and in her career as a marketing executive at a pharmaceutical company in Reading. He welcomed Martin into the family. He proposed a toast to the bride and groom. The guests raised their glasses. Martin spoke next. His speech lasted 8 minutes. He thanked his parents. He thanked Fiona's parents. He thanked the bridesmaids, each of whom received a small gift of a silver bracelet from a jeweller in Bicester that had cost £45 each. He thanked the best man, Mart. He proposed a toast to the bridesmaids. The guests raised their glasses. Mart spoke last, and here is what he said. Right. Hi everyone. I'm Mart. I'm the best man. I'm also called Martin, same as the groom, which is why I go by Mart. It's been a bit confusing all day. The registrar called me Martin twice earlier, and I didn't know whether to answer or not. There was a small ripple of polite laughter from table 8. Fiona's great-aunt Muriel, who was slightly deaf, turned to the person next to her and asked what he had said. I wrote most of this in the car this morning on the way down from Leicester. My girlfriend, Charlotte, read it on the M40, and she made me take a lot of it out, so if this speech is a bit rubbish, you can blame her, because most of the good bits were the bits she took out. Nobody laughed. Charlotte, who was sitting at table 8, looked at the tablecloth. A man at table 5 coughed. I've known Martin since we were 11. We met at Beauchamp College in Oadby on our first day of Year 7. We were put next to each other in Mr. Hollingsworth's maths class because our surnames were next to each other in the register. Martin's surname is Pritchard and mine is Prosser. Mr. Hollingsworth retired in 2009. I've just found out from Martin's mum, and he now lives in Spain, which is more than any of us managed in maths, to be fair. And there was a pause. One person at table 3 laughed. Nobody else laughed. Martin's mum smiled at Mart encouragingly. I'm going to tell you 2 short stories about Martin. These are the 2 stories that Charlotte said I could keep in. The first one is from when we were about 14. Martin had a paper round for a newsagent called Patel's on London Road in Oadby. One Sunday he was delivering a Sunday Times to a house on Stoughton Drive. The Sunday Times, as some of you will know, is quite a thick paper, especially with all the supplements. Martin couldn't get it through the letterbox. He tried folding it and he tried rolling it, but it wouldn't go. In the end, he left it on the doorstep. The next week he got a complaint because the paper had got wet in the rain. He lost 50 pence from his wages, which Knowing Martin probably explains why he became an accountant. This was the joke Mart had been most confident about. There was a short delay. Then a moderate laugh spread across about half the room. Gerald laughed, more loudly than the joke required. Martin smiled and shook his head. Mart looked relieved. The second story is about how Martin met Fiona. I was there the night they met. It was at a mutual friend's birthday at a pub called the Parcel Yard at King's Cross. Martin and Fiona got talking at the bar. They talked for about an hour and a half. I ended up talking to a man called Derek for most of the evening. Derek was the friend's uncle. He works for HS2. He told me a lot about HS2, a lot. Two people laughed. A man at table 6 said, "I bet he did," slightly too loudly, and then looked embarrassed. Martin and Fiona went on their first date the following Wednesday. They went to Wagamama's. Martin had a chicken katsu curry and Fiona had a yakisoba. Martin paid. The bill came to £47, which I know because Martin told me twice. One person laughed. It was Derek. So, I've known Martin for 23 years, and I have to say, I'm really pleased for him. Fiona is a lovely person. She's patient, which you need to be with Martin. She's organised, which is good, because Martin isn't, and she seems to genuinely like him, which, having known him for 23 years, I can tell you is not something you can take for granted. There was a warm laugh from the top table. Fiona laughed. Martin smiled and mouthed, "Thanks, mate," at Mart. This was the moment at which Mart felt the speech had gone best. "So I'd like everyone to raise their glasses. Please be upstanding if you want to be. You can stay seated. Actually, Martin's grandmother is waving at me. She's saying, 'Stay seated.' That's fine. Everyone stay seated." There was some confused movement around the room. Approximately a third of the guests had already stood up. They now sat down again. One guest, who had been halfway out of his chair, completed the standing movement, and then, seeing that nobody else was standing, sat down. To the bride and groom, to Fiona and Martin. The cake was a 3-tiered Victoria sponge with buttercream icing and fresh raspberries, supplied by a bakery in Woodstock called Fallon's, which had been in business since 1957. The cake cost £340, including delivery. The bakery's owner, a woman called Julie Fallon, was the granddaughter of the founder. Fiona and Martin cut the cake together at 5:52. Greg took a photograph. Greg took another photograph. The cake was then taken away by Colin to be sliced for later distribution to the guests. Colin took the cake to a preparation area at the back of the kitchen, where he sliced it into 114 portions using a serrated knife. Each portion was placed onto a small square of white greaseproof paper. The slicing took Colin approximately 22 minutes. The leftover cake trimmings were placed in a plastic container and put in the staff fridge, as was standard practice. They would be offered to staff on Monday morning. Between the end of the wedding breakfast and the start of the evening reception, there was a gap of approximately an hour and 20 minutes. During this period, most of the daytime guests moved into the Oak Lounge or the hotel's conservatory, where coffee was being served. A small number of guests went up to their rooms to change, or to lie down, or to make telephone calls. Gerald sat in the conservatory with his brother Keith, who had travelled from Nottingham. Keith was 3 years younger than Gerald, and had recently retired from a job at a logistics company. The two brothers discussed Keith's retirement plans, which included a caravan trip to Scotland in September, a decking project in Keith's back garden, and the possibility of learning to play golf. Gerald nodded at appropriate intervals. Keith drank a cup of coffee. Gerald drank a cup of coffee. They both ate a small biscuit that had come with the coffee. The biscuits were shortbread in individual wrappers, supplied to the hotel by a wholesaler based in Abingdon. Across the conservatory, Fiona's university friends were sitting at a table, talking about an article one of them had read in The Guardian about house prices. 2 of them had bought houses, 3 had not. In room 401, the bridal suite, Fiona had changed out of her wedding dress and into a second, shorter dress, which she had bought specifically for the evening reception. The second dress was white, knee-length, and had been purchased from a boutique in Marylebone for £240. The wedding dress was hanging on the back of the wardrobe door. Martin was sitting on the edge of the bed. He had removed his jacket and loosened his tie. He was checking the email on his phone. He had 47 unread emails, most of them work-related, which he had been ignoring since Thursday evening. "You don't need to check that now," said Fiona. "I'm not checking it," said Martin. "I'm just looking." "Right." Martin put his phone in his pocket. Fiona sat down on the bed next to him. "That was nice," said Fiona. "Yeah," said Martin. "The speeches were nice." "Yeah." "Dad's speech was longer than I thought it would be." "It was." "Mart's was a bit long as well." "Yeah." They sat on the bed for a minute without saying anything. "Are you hungry?" said Fiona. "A bit," said Martin. "There's the buffet at 8:30. "I know." "Did you have the cheese thing?" "The soufflé?" "Yes, I had the soufflé." "Was it nice?" "It was all right. I had the parfait." "Was that all right?" "It was all right." "Right." They sat on the bed for another minute. "We should probably go down," said Fiona. "Yeah," said Martin. They went down. The evening reception began at 7:30 with the arrival of a further 28 guests who had been invited to the evening only and not the daytime ceremony and meal. They were mostly more distant friends and colleagues of the couple. They arrived in a steady trickle between 7:20 and 8:15, A hot buffet was served at 8:30, consisting of a selection of cold meats, quiche, carnation chicken, a cheese board with crackers, bread rolls, potato salad, coleslaw. The pieces of wedding cake, cut by Colin, were placed on a separate table at the far end of the room. Some guests took a piece, some guests did not. The first dance took place at 8:45. Fiona and Martin had chosen the song At Last by Etta James, which had been playing on the radio on the morning Martin had proposed in a holiday cottage in North Devon in August 2023. They had practiced the dance 4 times in their living room in the week before the wedding. The dance went reasonably well. Martin stepped on Fiona's foot once, lightly, at the beginning of the second verse. After the first dance, the DJ, a man called Trevor Hamlin, who was based in Oxford and had been DJing weddings since 1994, began his evening set. His opening song was I Wanna Dance With Somebody by Whitney Houston. A small number of guests began to dance. The first guests to dance were Fiona's friends from university. There were 6 of them on the dance floor. 3 more joined during the second song, which was Dancing Queen by ABBA. Gerald's cousin Eileen, who was 68 and had travelled from a bungalow in Kettering, also went on to the dance floor during Dancing Queen. She danced by herself for the duration of the song. Her handbag was on an empty chair at table 3. She had asked her sister-in-law Barbara to keep an eye on it. Trevor the DJ played Come On Eileen as his third song. Eileen, whose name was in fact Eileen, nodded in appreciation and remained on the dance floor. After Come On Eileen, Trevor played Mr. Brightside by the Killers, which prompted a further 6 of Martin's friends from school to join the dance floor. They danced in a loose circle with their arms around each other's shoulders and shouted most of the lyrics. A large number of guests continued to sit at the edges of the room, talking to each other or checking their phones. Gerald had taken a seat near the bar, where he had purchased a pint of Timothy Taylor's Landlord for £5.40. He was talking to his brother-in-law Derek about a new bypass that was being built near Redditch. The bypass was expected to take 4 years to complete, at a projected cost of £132 million, though Derek was of the opinion that it would take longer and cost more, based on his experience of a similar bypass scheme near Worcester, which had taken 6 years and had exceeded its original budget by 34%. Gerald nodded. They discussed the bypass for approximately 11 minutes. After the bypass, they moved on to the subject of Derek's conservatory, which Derek had had built the previous summer at a cost of £28,000, and which he was happy with, though he had some concerns about the heating in the colder months. Outside in the car park, it continued to rain. The rain fell on the 62 parking spaces. It fell on the electric vehicle charging points. It fell on Derek's navy blue Volkswagen Passat, which had now been joined in the car park by a further 47 vehicles belonging to the evening guests. It fell on the ornamental pond with the koi carp, and on the lawn, and on the terrace where the empty Prosecco glass was now almost full of rainwater. It fell on the roof of the Cotswold Chine Country House Hotel. The roof had been retiled in 2017 at a cost mentioned on a plaque in the hallway of £94,000, a sum that had been partly funded by a grant from the local tourism authority. Inside the hotel, the wedding went on. Mr. Woodhouse had long since driven home to Oxford in his grey Skoda Fabia, and was now sitting in his living room watching a programme about antiques with his wife Patricia. He had a cup of Horlicks. The Horlicks was in his favourite mug, which was a mug he had been given in 2008 by a friend at the planning department on the occasion of his retirement. The string quartet had packed up their instruments at 4:10 and had driven back to Tetbury in two separate cars, one a Honda Civic and the other a red Renault Clio. They had stopped at a service station near Swindon for a cup of tea and a Kit Kat before continuing. The florist, Sandra, had returned to her converted barn in Chipping Norton at 3:45, where she was now preparing the flowers for a funeral at St. Mary's Church in Charlbury the following morning. The photographer Greg would continue to take photographs until 10:30, after which he would drive home to Banbury. He would spend the following Tuesday editing the photographs on his computer, a process that would take him approximately 9 hours, spread over 2 days. The DJ Trevor would continue to play music until midnight, at which point the evening would end, and the last guests would collect their coats from the cloakroom and walk out to their cars and drive away into the rain. Fiona and Martin would spend the night in the hotel's bridal suite, which the hotel had provided complimentary as part of the wedding package. The bridal suite was room 401 on the top floor, and it had a 4-poster bed and a view over the ornamental gardens. A bottle of Prosecco and a box of Belgian chocolates had been placed on the dressing table by Colin at 6:30 that evening. Margaret and Gerald would go to bed in room 203 at approximately 11:45. Margaret would go to bed first. Gerald would follow at 12 minutes past 12, after finishing a final pint of Timothy Taylor's Landlord in the Oak Lounge, and a short conversation with the best man, Mart, about the route he was planning to drive home the next day. Dorothy, Fiona's grandmother, would be taken to room 117 by her son Gerald at 9:40. He would be helped into bed by a member of the hotel staff and would be asleep by 10:05. The hotel night porter, a man called Stewart, who had worked at the hotel for 7 years, would sit at the reception desk from 11 until 7 the following morning. He would read a paperback novel. The novel was the third in a series of crime novels set in Yorkshire. He was approximately 110 pages in. And the rain fell on the hotel, and the rain fell on the car park, and the rain fell on the ornamental pond, and the rain fell on the lawn, and on the terrace, and on the empty Prosecco glass that was now completely full of rainwater and had begun to overflow. And the rain fell on the village of Little Wendlebury, and on the fields beyond the village, and on the hedgerows, and on the roads, and on the motorway 7 miles away, and inside the hotel, in their separate rooms, the guests of the wedding slept. Gerald slept. Margaret slept. Fiona and Martin slept. Dorothy slept. Great-aunt Muriel, who had been returned to her residential care home in Cheltenham at 9:15, slept in her own bed there, under her own eiderdown, with her hearing aid on the bedside table. The chairs in the Regency suite had been stacked by Colin and returned to the chair store behind the garage block. The floor of the Regency suite had been swept. The glasses had been collected and taken to the kitchen. The aisle runner, with the small wrinkle near the end, had been rolled up and placed in a cupboard. The fireplace in the oak lounge was dark. The electric heater had been switched off. Stewart, the night porter, turned a page of his paperback. Outside the rain fell on, softly, on the 62 parking spaces, on the 2 electric vehicle charging points, on the roof that had been retiled in 2017 for £94,000, on the koi carp in the ornamental pond, on the empty Prosecco glass, which was by now full to the brim and spilling slowly onto the stone balustrade, and from the balustrade onto the flower bed below, and on the whole of the Cotswolds, and on the whole of Oxfordshire, and on the whole of England. Everyone was asleep. Everyone was fast asleep after attending, probably, or almost definitely the most boring wedding that ever was and ever will be.